Right, so going with the new plan of doing videos every couple days or so, once I have a bigger project done. This past week or so, I've been practicing figure drawing. I drew a lot. I realized that I was very rusty, so I decided to go back to basics, and I did like nearly 300 figure drawings. It's probably more than I've drawn in years. And I saw quite a lot of improvement compared to even where I was before. And while I was doing this, I kind of wrote like this rough list of things I learned. And what I want to do in this video is go through it with the drawings as examples. So the first thing I did actually was set some goals. And I think it's a good idea to set goals whenever you're practicing almost anything. For this, it's my goals about what I want the drawings to do for me. Usually, a lot of artists use them to loosen up, and they are useful for that, but that's kind of a minor point for me. I want them to be a base I can build upon, so a base I can add skeletal structure, muscles, and eventually finish the figure. So I also want this to be a shorthand for sketching. So if I'm sketching from life and I only have like 10-20 seconds, I want to be able to capture that person down really quickly, and I want to be able to look back on the drawing weeks, months, years later and be able to see that, I don't know, that person was bending down to tie their shoes, strumming a guitar, or whatever I see. I want it to be clear to me, hopefully to other people, but as long as it's clear to me weeks later, that's gonna be good enough. And with this comes like developing a language for your sketches. And that's maybe part of the shorthand that other people won't understand. And then finally, this is not so much a goal, but I see a lot of people say that gesture drawing is for learning anatomy, and that doesn't make any sense to me. If you don't already understand the muscles beneath the figure, then what exactly are you trying to learn? Like, you can't see them. If you just learn, like, purely memorize all the muscles in different situations and what curves they make, it could take ages to learn that, and I think it's almost useless compared to learning to construct the figure. And of course, for that, you do need to learn anatomy, but for me, that's a separate process. I'm not trying to learn the anatomy through gesture drawing, as I've seen people suggest. Whenever you see an anatomy drawing, I'm doing that from my anatomy book or some other reference. Then I'm learning to apply it to the gesture drawing. And on to the second part. These are just kind of general guidelines, things I wrote down that I found helped me. And here I've expanded on them just a bit with some examples for the video. So the first thing is get a lot of scratch paper specifically. I wouldn't waste even the cheapest sketchbook on this. But I want to emphasize that I don't think it's about quality or quantity or even how much time you take practicing. It's about developing skill. So it's the improvement that matters. If your method is helping you improve, that's good. And I just listed some examples to help show what I'm talking about. So the first thing, and this is something I used to do, is just mindlessly do 30-second drawings. And I think no matter how many of these you do, the improvement is going to be minimal compared to what I do now, which is I do maybe anywhere from 30 to like 70, so averaging like 50. 50 or more 30-second drawings, but I focus on one thing. I focus on one thing to improve, and that shows improvement in that one thing, and it becomes obvious really quick. Like within the week, I could obviously see improvement in all sorts of things that I focused on. My other example is doing very long drawings from observation, and these can take 30 minutes, or if you give me enough time, I'm going to get it perfect. But this doesn't really help me. I mean, of course, it'll develop you seeing from observation, but if you can already do that, okay, the improvement's going to be minimal, and there's going to be nearly no improvement to your ability to construct things. So like you're improving a skill, but it's a different skill. So that's why I think it's important to have the goals set. In comparison, I think what helped me more is just doing a couple of longer drawings, like 10 minutes each, and focusing on getting it right, on getting the structure right, the construction right, the curves right, on getting it all right in a slow manner. And then lastly, two other things that I'll do occasionally is just 1 to 2 pages, either figuring out the anatomy. So this is what I talked about before, how I separate it. Basically, I'll copy anatomy from the book, but I won't just copy through observation, of course. I'm trying to understand how the muscle works, what the muscles are doing in like different positions, how the bones are turned, the hands turned, and also simplifying like the muscle groups, because there's so many muscles that you don't even see, and work more as groups than as individual muscles. And also noting what you see on the surface, so then that helps with the gesture drawings and finding where the muscles actually are. And then lastly, I also have tried out recently doing 1 to 2 pages, just experimenting with like styles and methods. I would do this occasionally, just throughout the drawings, but I dedicated pages to it where I just try to figure out like how to draw the pelvis, how to draw the rib cage, how I'm going to represent that, and that's what helps with the sketching language. And since, as you can see, by what I put in parentheses, there isn't one specific quality that means you'll improve. You have to measure yourself. And I think one quick like measuring stick to whether the method will work or not is if when you try it, it's tiring your mind. So it should be tiring to do this stuff. It should take effort, and you should feel like you're working at something. It shouldn't be mindless to where you can pay attention to anything else. You should really be concentrating on it. Next, and I think this is something that is overlooked because I've overlooked it, but since I'm so rusty, it's been hard even drawing circles sometimes, or like properly perspective cylinders. So I got to drawing, as you saw in the beginning, just lines, circles. I also did cubes when I did the pelvis. Cylinders in perspective. The cylinders, I think, were the most important. I kept thinking, I mean, what if I could do this line the first time, um, without ghosting, maybe, without lightly drawing it in first, then making it darker. That would improve. Like, there's a lot of room for improving speed there. I also practiced a bit of accuracy, so dividing the page in half, in thirds, in fourths, and you can check this by measuring with the ruler, because that's very helpful if you want to keep proportions. I'm okay with proportions, but sometimes I don't know what I see, but especially when things are foreshortened, that's kind of when things go haywire. So I thought that would be useful. And you can do, like, I separated them, and you can do, like, I don't know, a page or so each with each session is enough. Maybe that's your warm up. And then another point is experiment with methods, styles, artists, teachers. Basically, if you're stuck, maybe you're having difficulty doing the arms or something, I recommend you look somebody up, more than one person maybe. I don't think there's a perfect guide for everyone. You should mix and match, and see what works. Copy them, but without copying them. Basically, you shouldn't just be mindlessly copying them because that's useless. Um, Analyze what they're doing, why they're doing it. And I recommend you look at one method before a session, and if it's from a book or a website or something where it has text explaining what the artist is doing, I would quickly jot down some notes and kind of keep those in mind. Even use them for the following point, which is to focus on one thing at a time. So focus on each of those points you wrote down one at a time. For the gesture drawing specifically, I wrote down some aspects I wanted to improve. The first was curves. One of the artists I was looking at was Michael Hampton, and I love the way his method for constructing the figure. It pretty much aligns with most of my goals. I don't really like how he renders, but I can change that. And he said he was talking about how the curves of the body alternate to lead the eye, and I found that really interesting. And then another thing I wanted to focus on just a bit, because I'm not too bad, was proportions. Third was speed, but that just kind of comes with practice. So speed comes with practicing each of these. Um, Accuracy, by that I mean accuracy to the pose I'm seeing, and emotion or story is the accuracy to the story. So later, will I be able to tell what that person was doing? Um, Clarity is just clarity of line. So are the lines clear? Is the pose easy to understand, at least for me? Exaggeration is kind of goes with emotion and story. Next is usefulness, and that kind of goes with clarity. Usefulness is whether I can use that pose to construct the skeleton and the muscles on top of it, or whether I exaggerated too much. And last is implying actions and lines. So that kind of goes with the clarity. I want the sketch to be clean and to have lines be implied instead of actually there. So the gesture has a bit more life. Some things to note is that some of these don't actually go well together. I wouldn't recommend practicing. Like you can practice more than one, maybe two at a time, because they kind of go together. But some don't, like accuracy and exaggeration. But some like story and exaggeration really do, and it might be better to actually practice those together if you can. And the next point is study anatomy while doing figure drawings. I see a lot of people say that like figure drawing is kind of the first step because you want to capture that emotion, and maybe that's true, maybe that works for people, but that hasn't worked for me. It hasn't helped to just try to do figure drawings without understanding the anatomy. It was when I started to understand the anatomy, when I started to draw the muscles of the leg and the arms, that the drawings really started to improve. I mean, you can see it here as I'm passing the last couple of pages after like the 200th drawing, after I did the legs and the arms. That's when I think they really started to get better. I mean, there was a bit of a rough period, but then it kind of evened out, and I quite like how they look now. But that only really happened in my point of view because I did the anatomy studies, and if I did more, I think I would improve even further. I don't think it would hinder me in making the figure stiff because I'm not actually drawing the muscles yet. I'm just using the knowledge to do the gesture drawing. The next point is going slow to fast. So I see a lot of figure drawing lessons kind of making you do quick poses first and then taking longer and longer with the figure, and that might be useful I think later. So for example, once I get the gesture drawings down, I can go into that kind of lesson mode. So I do the gestures first, and then I slowly concentrate on building structure and the muscles and all that. But for actually practicing, I think it's a good idea to actually slow down at first. That's one of the things that helped. Slow down, kind of capture the gesture in as much time as I need. Also do the construction drawings and take like 10 minutes on those. And once I get that to a level I think is acceptable, then improve the speed. And then I can do the other lesson style where you reverse this. Now, lastly, it's important to critique yourself or have someone critique you. If you can't see any improvement in a day, I'd wait a few days and just keep practicing, even if you can't see anything wrong. I also suggest that you mark your best poses and everything else. Really analyze what's wrong with those. Kind of do mental notes on what you should practice next time. And even your best poses, still analyze what's wrong with those. If you can see anything, you'll probably be able to see something in a few days or weeks. Um, and just as a general like amount, I started to see improvement maybe after like 150 to 100 gesture drawings. That's when I started to see a bit of improvement. So if your sessions are less than that, you might not see it as fast. It's not quantity isn't important, but it is what kind of helps you see that progress. And then the last section, these are specific things related to gesture drawing. The first is don't skip a pose you already did. I used to do this a long time ago. I was like, why would I bother drawing the same pose again? I already drew it. Well, do it again. It's great for comparing progress. You can also try new things. The first time, maybe the arm was wonky. Well, this time, try different. Um, from this, for example, came the second point. I was doing a drawing where the guy had a weapon in his hand, but you couldn't clearly see that he was holding the weapon. It was kind of confusing. So instead, what I decided to do the third time was draw the weapon as an extension of his hand, and I think that's a much more elegant solution, and it also let me place the arm in the correct place, because in the others, it's like too far off. And there was also this other pose where it would have worked nicer, where the hand was in front, because otherwise it was just a mess of lines. Third is to simplify mirrored limbs with gesture. So to kind of get more time to work on other stuff, draw, like if you have someone putting their arms up and they're kind of facing away from you, maybe a 3/4 view, draw the arm or the leg closest to you, and if that limb is mirrored, just kind of do a quick gesture line for it. And that's kind of my sketching language for duplicate this on the other side. And that'll help with speed, and it'll leave you time to focus on other things during the 30 seconds or so. Fourth, this is really important, and something I learned recently, I kind of realized, is that the curve of the pose or like the action line almost never matches the curve of the chest of like the line that divides the figure in half along the front, and the spine which divides it along the back. I used to kind of try to do the gesture line by following one of those lines, but I would always fail. It would always look weird to me. And this is because, as I realized that when I drew a side view, it kind of sparked a light bulb moment. But since the curves are kind of alternating, um, the chest and the spine never match. Those lines never match unless you're looking at someone head on. So unless you're looking at them head on and they're bending to one side or the other, that gesture line isn't going to match. And the inspiration for kind of doing this came from two places. One was the lightning bolt method of gesture drawing, and I'll link to that video below. This is very similar, except I don't actually connect the lines all the time. And the second place is Michael Hampton, who I talked about earlier, who I was looking at his sketches, and he talks a lot about curves and stuff and how the figure alternates lines. So basically what I do now, as you can see in the drawings, is that, for example, I'll put one line along the hip, one along the inner thigh, one along the back of the leg, one along the foot, and it kind of alternates, and I don't connect them unless maybe the leg is straight or something. So sometimes I'll draw just an S curve for the leg for really quick poses. But it helps to keep the lines clean, and it helps imply a lot of the muscles along the leg. Anyways, that's the end of the list for now. I hope you found some of it useful. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I'll put links to all the things that I talked about in the description. Next time I'm probably going to be doing something with perspective, but feel free to suggest any other topics you'd like me to cover.